All right, welcome to Smart Money Chat Week 2. You're back with Danny and I for a second week of this podcast. We have a heavily requested topic this week. We got a lot of messages, a lot of DMs about BILT and specifically BILT 2.0 on, people asking us, should we get the card? Should we not get the card? Is it worth it? I'm confused by this, or people that are just saying, I absolutely love this. It's a game changer. So today's topic is reviewing BILT 2.0. We're going to have a little debate on this and whether we think it's an overhyped card or an undervalued card. So thanks for joining, and as always, follow along. Danny, I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is a big topic for us because we're always constantly we're talking about different credit cards all the time, right? And one of the big ones that came up recently was BILT 2.0. And we had clients who had the original BILT and they said this was my greatest card because I got points for my rent. And now, BILT 2.0 includes the mortgage piece to it, and now everyone's like, oh, this is the greatest card. There's an annual fee, of course, but the thing is like, is this card worth it for me or not, right? And I know you and I have debated about this. You and I have talked to many clients about this, especially the clients who already have the built card, and a lot of back and forth, like what works, what doesn't work, what's the strategy, and that's the big piece, right? I mean, we're talking about strategy all the time. We're always talking about like, hey, does this card fit your lineup? And I mean, you've seen in our past few videos, we've talked about our top three card. Built is one of your top three. Built is not in my top three. And we'll get more into it and like why it works and it doesn't work for us.
I think you've raised a great point because I got built in March of this year, and obviously I've made videos about it. But before that, you and I had started talking about built when 2.0 was becoming new and there was all this hype around it, right? Like, I agree that built 1.0, game-changing market, right? Like, everybody knew you
Absolutely.
could earn points on groceries and dining and restaurants and all that stuff. But when they came out with the rent earning capacity, that was just mind-boggling to me. And I wasn't
Right.
renting at the time that they came out with that card, and they didn't have the mortgage capability yet, so I wish I would have been able to have it. But we both know a lot of people that earned a ton of points through the rent way pathway. So the fact that they came out with 2.0 was great. The way they rolled out 2.0 was a little hectic in my opinion. I mean, it took me
It was
7 months to figure out which
Yeah, it was a
avenue
little
I
choppy
should go.
it was a little choppy in the beginning. I mean, I'm glad they had a quick turnaround where they had the two options, but yeah, it was hard. I remember the first day it came out, everyone's like, I don't get it. And we're also like, we get it,
We don't
but we
either.
don't but we don't. And we're like, yeah, we wanna make sure it's the right card for you. And we're just like, and I felt bad, right? I was like, hey, we're supposed to be subject matter experts. And I'm like, ooh. Okay, let's dissect this.
Yeah. And so for those of you who don't know, so Built 2.0, there's three tiers of cards, and we can get a little bit more into that. But now basically the biggest change is you can earn points on mortgage if your lender qualifies. That's caveat number one.
Mhm.
Number two, there's obviously annual fees, so they go from the lowest card to the Palladium, which is the highest at 495, and that's the card that I hold. And then number three, there's two paths you can essentially take. You can figure out you should know what your monthly mortgage is before even considering a card. I mean, if you don't know what your monthly mortgage is, you might want to hang up and call us because we'll help you figure out your budget. But number two, if you know what your mortgage is, you essentially need to you need to spend 75% of your mortgage if you choose the non-cashback pathway. Spend 75% of the value of your mortgage in non-housing spend to unlock 1 point per dollar on mortgage. That's a mouthful. The other pathway is straight up 4% cash back on everything, and then you can use the built cash you accumulate to essentially unlock mortgage points, and that's the pathway I chose. There is a great website with a calculator out there. I use, Max Miles Points is a big creator, but his calculator helped me do the math, so that's kind of the one I refer back to. But Danny, I don't know if you have more details around the blue or obsidian cards outside of the palladium.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, right? I mean, a lot of times it's like the most like the one of the biggest things about points, right? I mean, we've heard it's like it's complicated, right? What we just said right now, right? It's like the 1 point per dollar, but you had to spend 75% of your mortgage or rent. The 4% cash back on everything and how that works. Rent day, how that works. Rent day is a big there's a lot of asterisks behind that one. I mean, and it's all about how it's post dated. we learned that recently actually with one of our clients. We're just like, oh yeah, I put everything on my rent day, and then for whatever reason, the post date was like on the third, and they didn't get their bonus, and they were like, what's going on? We're like, oh, that's weird. Like, why didn't it happen? Like, it happened on this date, but it was post dated on this date. It's weird, right? But it's also like it's just how everything is charged, right? So, I mean, the point wise you spent what you said over there was is accurate, and it's just like there's a lot to talk about behind that.
And I think to the reminder that rent day, while the transfers are insane, right? Like we saw Japan Airlines transfer earlier this year up to
Oh yeah.
basically 175% if you had their highest status or could
Right.
unlock
Yeah.
that. That's insane. You're getting way more cents per point on your valuation of flying Japan Airlines first class, which is one of the best on the market, especially if you get
Mhm.
the A380. But outside of that nerdy plane talk, I think that me and you, the debate that we've had is BILT one of the most underrated credit cards, or is it just overhyped for everyday non-credit card enthusiast? And
Right.
so that's, I think, I'm excited to dive into that. So, I think we should start by kicking it off with mortgage and rent, right? Either one, that's probably going to be a bulk of everybody's monthly spend.
Mhm.
So I guess for the people who are renting, let's start with them first and figure out are one of these cards worth it for them, or is it better just to pay your rent the traditional way?
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think one of the first things that we had to like preface, right, is the fact that like, does your building accept it, right? I mean, I remember, and I need you could talk more about this. You know this better than I do, but one of the things that they said was like in the beginning, right? Built 1.0 was specifically like if your building accepted it. Now, like I was renting a condo through a landlord and everything, we didn't qualify. But people in Chicago area, people who live in the better buildings, right? Like the Nemas, the Optimas, or these other buildings out there, built was accepted, and people definitely got a lot of points for that one. So that's the big one. But I would say like it's you gotta. I think there's a lot of math behind it, right? It's like how much is your monthly rent? That's the first question, and then on top of that, it's like can you earn, do you spend that much per month to facilitate that? So, I mean, like, if you're in Chicago, for instance, you can be paying anywhere from 2,500 to like $5,000 a month. Now, and now there's a huge math topic over there of like 25% versus like 125% of your spending on that. So, I mean, big topics over there, big point gains over there as well.
Yeah, and something else that I actually had like a client DM us was talking about the 28-36 rule essentially, and they're like, this isn't talked about this whole, and it's more specific towards mortgage, but that's a good guiding principle for rent too, right? And
Mhm.
so I go with 25% because that's just easy math to do. But essentially what that means is your net take home per month, your rent should not take away more than 25% of that income. Meaning, if you bring home, after taxes and everything, insurance is paid. If you bring home 10 grand a month, your mortgage or rent should be 2,500. And that's essentially the comfortable spot. And now, if you're bringing home 10 grand a month and you're spending 4 grand on rent or 5 grand on rent, that's not safe because that takes away from being able to, spend on your other necessities and wants and bills and savings because that's pretty important too. So, just wanted to quickly preface that as well that that rule out there exists, and again, it's a guiding principle, but don't go spending, you know, upwards of 30% of your net take home on
Right.
housing. The other thing with Built, I think something that took me a while to understand is who is it good for, right? So I think a majority of our clients are not in the credit cards game, like not, I wouldn't call it a game, but are not savvy with credit cards to the point that we are, right? Like we're really into it. We're nerds and we read the terms and conditions, with 90% of people don't. And so I think it's good to know that like if you have your staple card, right? Like so the stepwise approach, which we preach a lot, is know your budget. Know what your paycheck is doing, when it's coming in, where it's going, right? Like that's foundation number one. Set up your budget and we can obviously help. That's what we specialize in. And we take a non-app related approach where there's a lot of apps out there that can, help you figure out where your money is going, but we take the true value behind it, We'll talk about that on next week's episode and talking about what we actually do with our clients. I'm excited about that one. And then number three, what are you spending your money on? If you're somebody that lives in Chicago and you're spending all your money on dining out, the Bilt card's not for you, right? There's better cards that are going to earn you more points.
Mhm.
And the rent thing, I think you're right. You need to figure out whether it makes sense. I think this is one of those cards that it can, if you know how to use it properly, you can really accumulate some points. In a certain aspect, it is a no-brainer for me, because I have the Palladium and I earn 2x on everything. I mean, that I love that, but you also have to be able to spend a lot on your credit cards.
Right. And I think that's one of the things, right? It's like, yes, dining, right? That's a big topic, and we saw that with I believe the Obsidian card, where it's like, you get 3x for dining or groceries. Um, for me, that card doesn't work, right? I have an Amex Gold where I get 4x on both. It's like I don't have to choose one or the other. I mean, for me, my wife, it's a no-brainer, right? Whenever we're at a grocery store, whenever we're out to dine, it's always the Amex Gold. Prior to the Amex Gold, it was my Chase Sapphire Reserve. I was getting 3 points back per dollar, and I was loving it until it was like my Freedom card where I get 5% cash back on the category. But yeah, for me, the Obsidian card doesn't work. It's like I'm losing a point and I had to choose one or the other. And then it's like, am I spending that much? Like, do simple math, right? If you're simple math, your rent or your mortgage, let's say it's $3,000. 25% of that right there is already at like, well, we're just talking about like closer to I
Pick
should
simple
probably
math, Danny. Go with
yeah,
four
no, it's
grand.
so much. Yeah, let's go back down to 2000, right? 2000. We should cut that out.
No, that's a
Uh,
blooper.
yeah. So it's like, 2000 is your mortgage or rent, and let's say like 25% of that, $500, right? Am I spending $500 on groceries per month? Yes, pretty regularly, yes. And then am I spending $500 on dining? Not every month. I mean, quite frankly, there are some times where I'm just like, yeah, we're gonna cook in, or we're going to maybe we'll go out to eat, something like that. It's not often we go. So we got to see if that card's really worth it. But and the other thing is like that's for the Obsidian card, but then look at the other cards, right? We look at the blue card and the Palladium, and I think the Palladium is like heavily marketed, right? It is the most expensive card out there and it has like the most values. But is that the card that fits your need? And that's a big topic that a lot of people don't do research or do the marketing or don't do the research or the math behind it.
Or you end up with duplicate, credits in a sense because so what and that was my debate, right? Like did I need the Palladium card? No. I think I also have a very unique circumstance is that I don't have a corporate credit card and so I put I all my work spend I wanted a card that I could put my work spend on so I wouldn't be digging across my multiple cards when I'm submitting expense reports, right? So for me, I was like 2x back on this, conference fees, flights, things like that. Like if I can do it in a simple way for me to make my life simple at the end of the day when I have to do expense reports, it makes sense. But again, I have a very unique circumstance in that regard. So for consultants, people who are consulting, it might make sense, right? People who have high non-housing spend a month, and let's say you're putting it on, I don't know, something that earns you 1x or nothing, right? Like there's cards out there. We have a lot of clients who use debit cards, right?
Mhm.
Now, am I going to say you should go from a debit card to a Palladium? No, I'd be insane to tell you that. But I think there are people out there who have high monthly spend in non-housing areas who could earn a benefit from Palladium if they have no other travel cards and their lifestyle is changing. So for me, I thought it fit because of the 2x, being able to boost it. We were doing the home renovation, which we talked about last week.
Mhm.
That was an easy way for me to earn points. But the duplicate stuff like clear credits and whatnot, like I hate to say it, but like, am I somebody who has multiple cards with the same benefits? Yes. I wish it was different, but I have a Platinum, a United Club, and I have a Built Palladium, three travel credit cards that all give me clear pre-check. Do
Right.
I need three credit cards that have clear pre-check? No, but I'm using everything else on the card benefit except for that.
Right, and you know what, and that's the other thing too, right? When we talk about this, it's like, with the Palladium or any of the other cards, really, it's like we duplicate so many benefits, right? And that's where like the Obsidian comes in, where it's just like, 3x on one or the other, right? Gold has one, gold has both. Now it's like, oh, do I put one for dining and one for groceries? I'm like, I could, I'm splitting it. And I'm like, am I really going to get the points? And it's like the math turnaround, right? It's like, hey, when does the math make sense for me to do that? And I think that's always a big topic. And that's what that's when you and I are sitting with our clients, we're like consistently crunching numbers with them. Be like, all right, if you do X, Y, and Z, the card makes sense, right? But we've seen a lot of times where the card just doesn't make sense for some of our clients, where they just don't spend enough. And like, and a good example of when it actually works is like when we have a client who fresh out of school, they know they're going to be renting for the next few years, but they have no other credit cards, right? So we're just like, hey, you know what? You have your zero annual free card, which is like the first credit card you ever had. Let's think about BILT, right? Does this make sense to you? Like, what are your goals? Like, what do you want to do in the future? Like, do you want to accumulate points with rent and mortgage versus, what do you want to do with those points? Do you want to like travel with it, or do you want to spend it on X, Y, and Z? Um, and it's just like, we have some clients who are very honest with us that like, yeah, I don't see me traveling like that. So we're like, okay, then maybe this is a good card for you, you know?
Yeah. I mean, okay, so let's take our most recent client that we just talked to a few weeks ago. For everybody listening, 26-year-old, just graduated nursing school, moving to California, right? So high cost of living area, back to be with family, but planning on living in a different city than where their family lives, wants to rent because obviously housing is difficult to afford in California, especially in an entry level nursing salary. So we got asked about credit cards, and we've been, meeting with them for a while, doing their budget and everything, and good income, obviously, but figuring out, the first question for that client that we had, remember, it was, should I buy or should I rent, right?
Yeah.
Which was a long conversation, but we settled on rent because that made the most sense in this time frame. Should that client get a built card, Danny? Or do you think, and remember, this client only has that one other card, like you mentioned. Should they get built, or are there other cards that are better suited for that? And I think me and you had disagreed a little bit on there, for that client.
Yeah, we did because I mean, you know what? It was complicated because I felt like we went back and forth on this because, well, not to mention like our client was very confusing at the time, right? And was like not sure of where they want to go with. Do they want to rent? Do they want to buy? What's your long-term goal? That was such a big topic for us. And for me at that time, I took the oppose. I was like, oh, you know what? It's not worth it for you right now, right? And I was just like, I just feel like for somebody who has this one credit card and is not the best with the credit card, I mean, you remember they had interest, and I was like, okay, let's make sure let's start with the auto pay, right? Let's just make sure you have money in the bank and you're able to pay off your card. And like, let's not accrue any more interest. That for me was when I was like, you know what, let's not put you on another credit card just yet. It's the cognitive behavior of like, hey, let's make sure we can pay for what we like. Let's make sure we can spend what we already have, right? Let's not do anything more than that. Let's not forget how to pay our credit cards and all that. I think that was the big topic for me, where I was like, cognitively, I just think right now for you as a new client, let's just not get the new car just yet. Like, let's
Yeah,
get you
yeah.
situated. Like,
And my stance, just for everybody to know, is, moving to a high cost of living city, if you're going to be there for a year or two, with a new job where you're making income, and you have us to guide you with your budget, why leave those rent points on the table when they can be banked and used in the future? And that was, I think, the premise of Danny and I, kind of taking opposing views. And I think that's good, right? This is what differentiates, having a financial coach versus an app tell you what to do, because we have, Danny and I have a lot of times where we sit in the back and we disagree on topics and we come to a mutual conclusion. But the reason we do what we do is we can literally put ourselves in our client's shoes and say, do you, like Danny said, do you know the basics? Are you paying interest, right? Because that's a big red flag. If you're holding credit cards and you're paying interest, you shouldn't go get a new card. As much new credit card content as I make, we don't forget the basics, and we tailor everybody's situation to their plan, right? So it's almost like a personal trainer in a sense, but with basic budgeting and credit card tips. And I think that's good to know, right? We're not just sitting here, hawking credit cards at people saying, get this one, do the build, do the MX Gold. Do we both love Amex Gold? Yes. Will
Yeah.
we give it to every single one of our clients? No. But
And that was
I
the
think
other
that was my standpoint was, you know, you're moving to a your rent is probably going to cost you between 2 and 3 grand a month, right?
thing.
You might as well earn those points a year.
Right.
And don't you don't have to do the palladium, right? Like I think that's something else to note for all of our listeners out there who are just now, understanding how to use credit cards and figuring out which credit cards are best. We're happy to help you, but know that it's kind of like car shopping, right? Do you want to go buy a Porsche? Yes. Should you? No.
And that's funny you mentioned a Porsche. That's my dream car. And I had like this Hot Wheel right in front of me. And I was like, I always look at this car. I was like, this is the dream car right here. But you know, one thing I will say about that client, what I liked about her, she was very honest, right? And it was like the one thing that she said was like, I was never good with my finances, right? It was just like it like not like it was always taken care of for her, but it was also the fact that like it's like, it was just taken care of, like whatever I spent in college, like my parents were like she was privileged where she was like able to, pay that off pretty quickly.
Mhm.
And that was the one thing I wanted to tell her. Like, I remember one of the conversations we had with her was the fact that, um, no problem getting the card at the end, right? But that doesn't mean you get an additional $2,800 in your bank account, right? It doesn't, you have to pay it off, right? That is like your priority. And I think that's where you and I disagreed, where it's like, it's great for her to get the points, right? For me, it was more the cognitive where I was like saying like, I don't want you like steeping where you're like, oh, you know what? I put $2,800 on my built card for rent. Now I have $2,800 back in my account that I could just go willy-nilly and just spend. And I was like, no, no, let's pay that off before anything. So you are disciplined and structured. And now you know how much you have left.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the last message we got was she was still debating on getting the card, so it hasn't like fully committed yet. But you're right, because the way Built works is through ACH, right? It's not like you when you go to the grocery store and buy something. You don't get to pay it 3 weeks later. It's an ACH payment. So yes, will it post on your Built credit card? Sure. Will it come out of your checking almost immediately? Yeah, so you better make sure you've got that money in your checking account because
Right.
otherwise you're going to be subject to withdrawal fees and everything else that comes along with a negative balance.
Mhm.
So I think you're right. It's this system is very complicated, and I think it's intended for people who really are savvy and know how to use this system. I think Built 1.0, great for a majority of people, right? When
Right.
we get to 2.0, you really need to understand when to use the card, how to use the card. And I think we agree on that.
Yeah.
I will say though, I think for me this card has been game changing. I mean, I've accumulated more points than I would have on other credit cards, right? So like if I compare it to my MX Platinum, which I guess is not a fair comparison, right? Because at baseline you're getting 2x versus 1x. But even if we compare it to my MX Gold, and you've got the gold too, but if you get 2x on everything, and you can really easily earn built cash, and you can turn on an accelerator up to 5 times a year, where for that $5,000 in purchases, you're earning 3x at baseline, right? So then it's almost like, okay, can you turn that accelerator on when you know you have big purchases coming to maximize it? Sure, because I just did that with home renovation stuff, like we talked about, right? So it's that strategy behind going to the grocery store, buying your gift cards, and for things that you can't get gift cards on, if you have a built Palladium, turn on the accelerator and get those extra points for it. But again, you have to be savvy, and so I think. For me, it is an undervalued card because alongside the MX Gold, I think it's one of the most lethal combinations to earn points. But only if you're smart about it and you know your budget and can predict when your spending is coming.
Right. Yeah, that was the other thing too. I mean, I know in our next question, one of the questions that did come up, it's like, oh, should I get the Palladium? And it was like, and when we looked at our client's budget, it was just like, it's like, hey, I don't think this is the best card for you, but Built does offer two other cards. And I still remember you and I had this face where our client was like, "Yeah, but the Palladium looks cool." And I'm like, "Oh my God." I was like, "Bye." I was like, "Why?" It's like the blue card looks cool too. And it's like zero annual fee too. And I was like, and it does almost the same, but I'm like, there are other cards out there. I mean, like I think Built the ecosystem is good, right? I mean, and used appropriately, it's a great ecosystem. Um, but just I feel like a lot of people like, especially like when you're on like TikTok or Instagram, like, Palladium is so heavily marketed where it's like, we talk about this all the time, right? Like people are talking about the Palladium, but there are two other cards that are equally as good and could be as beneficial and strategic for you to build points. And you and I have talked about this. I'm still on the fence about getting the build card. If I'm going to get it, it's probably going to be the blue one where I'm like, it's zero annual fee, but it's also like, it doesn't make sense for me. And like, could that be my new everyday card instead of my Chase Ultimate Freedom? And it's like, it's like that one, it's like 1.5 versus one. But the caveat is like, hey, I got points for my mortgage.
That's a good point. And so that brings me to two audience questions that we had submitted prior. So the first one, I'm gonna read it to you. Does Built make sense for someone who's never tracked points before? I'll let you go first.
Ooh, then you know what? It's funny. I feel like it's like that question to me, it always cracks me up, right? Because like there are people like you and I who are tracking points heavily, right? And then there are people who are um who have the car who just accumulated points. And it's kind of like, oh, I just found like $5 in like my pocket in like while I was doing my laundry. And there it's like it's the surprise like, oh, oh, that's cool. Like but like some people just don't track it and they're just like, oh, like where did this come from? And then we had to like, dissect for them and just tell them it's like, hey, with like your trend was like this.
I agree. Yeah, that's a complicated question to answer. I don't know if Built is the right first card for you to learn how points work. And I go back and forth because is it a relatively simple card? Yes. Is the 2.0 system kind of new? Sure. I've seen posts on Reddit and other places in social media where people are struggling with the app and the glitches and fraudulent charges and interest posting and things like I wouldn't want your first experience with a card that's earning you points to be that hectic in a new setting. So in that case, I would say probably not. Maybe your third or fourth card if it fits the right scenario, and you're budgeting for it. Next question: should I get built if I already have a Chase Sapphire Preferred or Reserve, or an MX Gold?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we touched on this before, right? It's like there's a lot of like there's a lot of like overlapping benefits, and it's like really like with the reserve or with the preferred or even like Amex Gold, Amex Platinum, it's like, we've talked about this like, how many different clear passes do I need? How many different priority passes do I need? How many different, but I mean, it's just overlapping, right? Um, would I personally choose it over the other two? Probably not. I mean, you and I have talked about this. Like, I think Platinum is a great card. I think the Reserve is a great card. I think those are top two for travel cards unanimously. But I think Built 2.0. It shows like they've upped their game where they could make it a premium travel card,
I
and I
mean,
think more to come with it.
at $500 a year, I would consider it a pretty
Right,
premium card, right?
exactly.
And
It's
and I
like
think the other thing for the listeners is if you're gonna put it next to a platinum like I have or a reserve, you need to make sure you're recouping your collective $1,300 in annual fees because
correct.
otherwise you're just throwing money down the drain for no reason. Um, so this one's also an interesting question. How do I know if I should do the cashback pathway or the percentage of rent mortgage spend? That's a tough question. In all answer, I'll defer back to that Max Miles website that really helped me do my math. I mean, it's simple math if you sit down and do it, but his calculator is just easy to use. I think I went the cash back way because I had a unique circumstance and that I had a lot of like a lot of spend coming up. So I knew I would accumulate that cash back to guarantee my mortgage points. Now, if I didn't have all of that other spend coming up this year, I don't know that I would have gone with this card specifically. Do I think I like earning 2x? Yes. I like earning 2x, 3x, 4x. I'd be crazy. Anything better than 1x is fantastic.
Mhm.
Would I have gotten this card if it wasn't for my circumstance? I would have been on the fence because I wanted to get the Amex Brilliant Marriott card because of how frequently I'm at hotels and it guarantees me platinum status. And that's the other aspect that I want to touch on is anytime you're getting a card, it's not just about understanding your budgets or what your short-term benefits are, it's your long-term benefit, right? And so you get, for example, Amex Platinum gives you Marriott Gold, right? The longer you hold Marriott Gold, if you're still traveling for work, you can get the lifetime status by the time you retire. Now, that's my goal is to make sure I'm looking at the long game, right? 20, 25, 30 years from now, have I collected enough status where now in multiple segments I have a lifetime status so I don't have to worry about, sitting in row 42C? Yeah. That's my goal. Do I want to get upgraded to suites when I retire? Yes. So I think that's important part of understanding how these reward systems work. And we can help with that, right? Like that's something that I'm enthusiastic about.
Mhm.
So I know we've got a few minutes left, and so that was, I think, the last of the audience questions. Now we got to vote. Do we think Built is overhyped or sorry, undervalued? Is Built undervalued or overcomplicated? I'm gonna let you take this one first.
Yeah, I'm still on the fence about this one. I mean, it's still complicated for me personally. I mean, is it a card that I'm going to get? I don't know. I mean, I just bought a house more recently. I look at my budget. I look at like, I mean, I look at my personal finances, right? I mean, and I'm looking at like, am I spending enough to really get the full one for one or the 1.25 to one? I mean, that's where I'm looking at it. I'm like I don't want to do unnecessary spend just to get mortgage points. Like I know like the bare minimum is like 250 points, something like that. Or or you got to spend like at least 25% of your mortgage. But am I taking that away from something else, right? Like it's like I could tell you right now, like my biggest expenses are always going to be my groceries and my utilities. And a good question that came up, and this came up in my personal finance the other day, was my Verizon bill, right? So it's like if I give up the debit card option, the debit card auto pay option, I have to pay an additional $20 because it's like $5 per line I had to spend. And then and then with a credit card, it's like a 3% fee. Does the math really work out? Not really, no.
No.
So I'm like, you got to see which utilities work and which one doesn't for me to get those points. So I'm still on the fence, but I feel like by December, I'm going to be like, all right, I've had a year in my house. I know what it's like. Am I gonna pull the trigger? Yes, no. We'll come back in December about that one.
Danny's leaving you all with a cliffhanger. So I think this card for the right person is undervalued. And that's a huge asterisk caveat, right? Like if you are familiar with points, you know your mortgage, you're accepted into it, and like it depends on what your mortgage is, right? If you have a high mortgage, is it worth getting some benefit out of that? Yes, but you need to understand how to use this points. Like I said, it all comes back to strategy. So for somebody like me, I think it's an undervalued card because of how many points I've quickly accumulated. But I wouldn't recommend that to a majority of our clients. I think the renting option is great for certain
Yeah,
clients who have
for sure.
stable income, who have their budget set up, through us. Or even if you don't, if you know where your money's coming in and going out, it might make sense. But I think for the Palladium card specifically, I wouldn't recommend it for everybody unless you really understand how the system works.
Mhm. And that's the thing, right? I mean, we're like we said before, like Palladium is heavily marketed. It's a great card. I mean, we've seen like, I mean, it's benefited you. I think it was a good card for you. I know when you and I went back and forth, we're like, yeah, this makes sense, right? And then the other client that we spoke to, the one in California, the blue made the most sense for
Yeah.
them. And it was just like, yeah, you know what? Like let's not go ahead and spend like almost $500 annually. Let's get you the zero annual one. Let's accumulate stuff, and then let's go. I mean, they're still on the fence, but you know what? I think she's leaning towards blue, but she's almost there. I feel like I mean her last text to us was like, yeah, how do I get started? And I'm like, all right, I think we're there.
Danny's a pretty convincing coach, by the way, if anybody hasn't realized. He's talked me out of numerous bad financial decisions, which is why we make great co-founders. So I think that's a good segue into next week's topic. So, we wanted to move this topic we were eventually going to do in the future, but we had so many friend and client questions about this over the last 2 weeks that we're like, let's just do this on a segment. I think next week is going to be kind of interesting because we're going to take y'all behind the scenes of what we actually do with clients, the types of questions we get, how we set up their budget, more on the personal finance side and budgeting than credit cards, right? Because we've been doing a lot of credit card type of content, which is great for a certain demographic. So Danny, I don't know if you want to speak more to like the kinds of things we're going to be talking about next week for
Yeah,
personal
no,
finance.
absolutely. I mean, yeah, for personal finance, a lot of stuff that we talk about, it's like we do a lot of deep dive, right? I mean, we see everything behind it. And it's, we build trust between us and the client where we're talking about like, what's already there, what are we working on, what's our goal for the future, right? We look at credit card scores, we talk about your take home bi-weekly paycheck, what are your biggest expenses, and we talk about goals too, right? Where we incorporate the credit card game, where we talk about like, how do we tackle our loans or how do we want to increase our credit card debt or our, sorry, not debt, our increase our credit card score. And one of the things that we just have this absolute trust with our client where we're just talking to them and saying like, hey, how can we grow together, right? Because the big
Yeah,
thing is credit cards are great, but personal finance is the foundation before you make any major credit card decision or any major purchase. And you got to make sure that you have what it takes before you start spending the money. So,
completely
um,
agree.
yeah,
Completely agree. All right, everybody, thank you for joining. We will see you next week talking about personal finance. Have a good rest of your week.
take care.
Take care.